I sort of backed my way into the story, but I learned about Asherah, who is, this character in the Old Testament, and I had never heard of Asherah before. Scholars were saying that she was the wife of God, and I thought that was just utterly shocking and unbelievable. How could God have a wife? Because we never talk about that kind of thing, and I couldn't even really imagine what it meant. And so I dug in to try and figure out what the story was, and I was pretty shocked by what I learned. What I discovered is that Asherah, she was the wife of God because they were pagans. They weren't monotheists. They didn't know anything about monotheism, never heard of monotheism. They wouldn't have known what you were talking about. It was a pagan culture. All the stuff in the Bible they talk about, the worship of foreign gods, is actually not precisely historically accurate. What was really happening was that there was a reform movement going on. Yahweh, Yahweh, there's two names of God in the Bible. You got Elohim and Yahweh. And so Yahweh was this reform movement. It was a young God, and it was a pagan God. And he was just one of many gods. Elohim was the old ancient sky father. He's like the really ancient creator of the universe. It actually does go back way back in time. And it's only when they're in the Babylonian exile that they get influence from the Persians, and the followers of Yahweh invent the whole idea of monotheism kind of out of whole cloth. And they reinvent themselves as the Jews for the Second Temple when they go back to Jerusalem and in the 5th century BC and become the Jews as we know them today. Then they're monotheists. And then the goddess has been thrown out.
Won't you come and take me away? I just wanna be with you. Won't you come?
If there's a Father God, if there's a Son of God, shouldn't somewhere along the line there be a mother? Like, where does the Son come from? The Father just speaks and it is, or does the Father plant a seed within the mother? Where does this fit in? And I believe that we've lost it somewhere along the line, that there was a divine feminine along the way. Now, many people are tying that into Sophia and wisdom, and the wisdom and feminine aspect of the Holy Spirit within Christianity. I've got to preface this. This is coming from a Christian mystical perspective. So many people tie the mother aspect into the Holy Spirit. She is the mother. God is the Father. Jesus is the Son. And the Holy Spirit is the mother. Is that necessarily true, though? When we look back into antiquity, when we look back into even early versions of the Hebraic Bible, there was mothers, and it was out of the earth and out of Eve. Eve was the mother of all living. Was she a goddess? There were two trees within the Garden of Eden. What is that? Who are they? And then with my study, I'm starting to see that there's other names of female deities or goddesses, if you will, that were in the original manuscripts of the Bible that we've forgotten about. Why did we forget about them? Why were they taken out? Some of them are even in there, but they're looked at as evil. Don't remember their names. Do not worship the Queen of Heaven, because I detest everything that she stands for and those things. Why is that? We're going to talk about it today. My guest is Edward Dodge, and we're going to talk about the return of the divine feminine, the return of the goddesses. Edward, welcome to the podcast, brother. How are you?
Truth, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. It's great to talk to you. Great to meet you here.
Yeah, you too, man. I've been watching some of your podcast, and I had some friends who've had you on their shows and stuff, and so just kind of correlates with what I'm studying right now, and so I genuinely have a bunch of questions about goddess worship, the origins of it, the ties in the Bible. There's terminology that's sprinkled throughout out the scriptures, and you hear the term the Queen of Heaven, but it's used in a negative connotation, those kind of things. And we've always said, stay away from it, And then we mentioned Christian mystic circles, right before we push record, but it's kind of an emerging circle. And they talk about the rise or the return of the divine feminine, and they look at the feminine aspects of God, the feminine aspects of the Holy Spirit and those things. But I think the conversation goes much deeper, and if we're talking about the rise of the return of the divine feminine, to get to the origins of that, And in my studies, and I'm studying a lot of the ancient gods and you know, all of the ancient texts or whatever outside of the Bible, and finding them in the Bible too. So that's what opens up this conversation for me. So just want to pick your brain about questions that I have, and to hear your research and your book that you talk about the goddesses from the Ice Age all the way up into the Bible, and then
Yeah,
continues
here's a
to
shameless
go.
plug.
There
Here's
you
the
go.
book I wrote. It's called A History of the Goddess from the Ice Age to the Bible. You can get it on Amazon or from Trine Day Publishers. And so, yeah, I wrote this book about, I sort of backed my way into the story, but I learned about Asherah, who is, this character in the Old Testament. I grew up in church. My parents weren't super religious, but I did go to church all growing up, and I had a lot of experience in church. And I had never heard of Asherah before. And scholars were saying that she was the wife of God. And I thought that was just utterly shocking and unbelievable. How could God have a wife? Because we never talk about that kind of thing. And I couldn't even really imagine what it meant. And so I dug in to try and figure out what the story was. And I was pretty shocked by what I learned. And so I ended up writing this book. There's sort of a little more to it, but yeah, I wanted to trace what I basically, long story short, what I discovered is that Asherah, she was the wife of God because the historical Israelites are distinct from the biblical narrative. The historical Israelites that actually existed around 1000 BC, and in the first temple period, when the historical nation of Israel actually existed and the historical nation of Judah actually existed. After King David took Jerusalem in 1000 BC, so it's from 1000 BC going forward for a few centuries. They were pagans. They weren't monotheists. They didn't know anything about monotheism, never heard of monotheism. They wouldn't have known what you were talking about. It was a pagan culture. All the stuff in the Bible they talk about, the worship of foreign gods, is actually not precisely historically accurate. What was really happening was that there was a reform movement going on. Yahweh, Yahweh, there's two names of God in the Bible. You got Elohim and Yahweh. And so Yahweh was this reform movement. It was a young God, and it was a pagan God. And he was just one of many gods. Elohim was the old ancient sky father. He's like the really ancient creator of the universe. It actually does go back way back in time. He was worshipped above all the other gods, and his son would be king of the gods. And every culture's got a different king of the gods. So Baal had been the king of the gods. Over in Babylon was Marduk. Over in you've got Indra, you've got Zeus, you've got a bunch of these different kings of the gods, all of whom are the son of the sky father. So El, and his Israelites, it's El, and his son was one of his many sons was Yahweh. And the followers of Yahweh were a reform movement. They wanted to change the cultural practices. They wanted to end things like idolatry. They wanted to end child sacrifice. They wanted to end sex rituals, because a lot of what this goddess worship is, there's a certain amount of like sex and drugs and music and dance and partying and getting on. There was ritual prostitution in the temple, in King Solomon's temple. It was like a historical reality. And the followers of Yahweh wanted to end those practices. And they basically battled it out for a couple centuries, all during the entire first temple period. The whole history of the historical nation of Israel and Judah was pagan, with these followers of Yahweh as these upstart reformers. And then the whole thing gets demoed, gets destroyed. The Babylonians come through, destroy. First, the Assyrians destroyed Israel, and then the Babylonians destroyed Judah, burned down the temple, sent everybody into the Babylonian exile. And it's only when they're in the Babylonian exile that they get influence from the Persians, and the followers of Yahweh invent the whole idea of monotheism kind of out of whole cloth. And they reinvent themselves as the Jews for the second temple when they go back to Jerusalem and in the 5th century BC and become the Jews as we know them today. Then they're monotheists. And then the goddess has been thrown out. And that's sort of the quick snapshot. But that's when they become Jews as we know them. Everything prior to that, we wouldn't recognize it if we went back in time and saw what they were actually doing.
Yeah, it's been real interesting. And my study just in the last several months, starting to look more like the Lord of the Rings trilogy than what we've been shown on, television, or Joseph, the Prince of Egypt, and all this kind of stuff. Like, it looks more like the Lord of the Rings, these gods, and even these the mixing of the Nephilim and those kind of beings and star gods and animal gods and all of this kind of stuff. So, one of the most interesting subjects and up for debate, but talking about the Garden of Eden, what is it? Is it an overview? Maybe even the first 5 books of the scriptures I'm just reading now, how they all seem like they were all of this was taking place maybe in the garden, whatever that is, whether that's the sky, whether that's the the zodiac or whatever, where these beings were being created and the gods were being worshipped. And it seemed that there was a mixture of gods that were creating different hominids, whether it was humans, whether it was again mixing with animals and those things. Where does the goddess fit in, Asherah fit in the Garden of Eden? Because we've heard about Lilith as well. She one of Adam's wives that had children and those things. But where does Asherah and Lilith fit into the garden?
Yeah, so I have 2 comments on that. One is, it's important to understand that Asherah is very similar to the other pagan mother goddesses of that era. And so there's a continuum of traditions that you can see across from one culture to the next. So, and they're mostly they get called the mystery religions. And so the most famous one is in Greece, Demeter and Persephone, and it's called the Eleusinian Mysteries. And that is about, and all of these mystery stories have a dying and rising god, and they're all about the turning of the season. So the story of Demeter is she was the goddess of grain, but she's really kind of the mother goddess for the ancient Greeks. She's the sister of Zeus. Zeus says their brother Hades, who's the lord of the underworld, can take Persephone, who was their daughter, the daughter of Demeter, and her one and only daughter. She was a goddess of spring. Zeus told Hades he could grab her and make him his wife, queen of the underworld. This is a very famous story in Greek mythology. So Hades kidnaps Persephone and brings her down to the underworld. And then Demeter is grief-stricken because she can't find her daughter. And so she plunges the whole world into famine. She doesn't let any of the crops grow. And so the gods are forced to relent and let Persephone come back. But she's eaten some pomegranate seeds while she was in the underworld. So she can only come back half the year, or a third of the year, depending which story there's different versions of the story, right? And so this shows she spends half the year as queen of the underworld, as the wife of Hades, and then she comes back in the spring, and it's a turning of the seasons. And this is like one of the most important traditions in all of ancient Greece. This was their biggest religion. It was really, really important. And there's equivalent stories. So in ancient Egypt, it's the stories of Isis and Osiris. It's always about the mother goddess who restores the dead god back to life. And it's always the power of the mother goddess that brings back the springtime renewal and the turning of the seasons, because they're all deeply rooted in nature and agriculture and plant growth and the growth of crops. And so these are all, they're called fertility religions or agricultural religions, but also the mystery religions. So you've got it with Isis and Osiris in Egypt. Over in Babylon, it's Ishtar. She raises Tammuz. And there's a bunch of these stories all over. Cybele is another one who is from Turkey and then goes to Rome. She was the oldest one. Asherah is part of these same set of traditions. There's 2 goddesses in the Bible. There's also Astarte as well. She's the one that King Solomon worships. She is the equivalent of Ishtar, the goddess of love and war. Asherah is the mother goddess. Astarte's her daughter. Astarte was the queen of heaven, actually, for those guys. She's the most popular one. And so they have this set of very, very ancient, very, very important agricultural traditions that have sex in them. They celebrate women's sexuality. They celebrate ritual prostitution. Ishtar was, she was a prostitute. She was a prostitute goddess, and she was the most popular goddess of the Bronze Age. And they celebrated women's sexuality because it brings forth life and creation. And so women were not shamed. There was no slut shaming going on. It was, they put these goddesses on a pedestal. And so this is what the reformers of Yahweh don't like that. They want to end these traditions. They want to put these traditions to rest and put them in the grave. And so in the Old Testament, the priestesses are called the Kadesha in the Hebrew. But you don't see it in the English text. In the English text, they're just called temple prostitutes or temple harlots, depending on which version you're reading, the King James or the different versions. But they'll be called temple prostitutes or temple harlots. but it's a different word from a regular prostitute. If you look in the Hebrew text, there's two different words. Zonah, Zonah, is a conventional like brothel prostitute, but a kadesha, and the word kadesha means holy. Those are the temple priestesses, and they have some kind of sex rituals. We don't really know the details, to be honest with you. I don't know the details of what they did, but we do know that like there was something going on. We do know they did ritual prostitution, because like that's a really old tradition. But we don't really know any more details beyond that. So the reformers of Yahweh want to end these traditions. They really don't like it. It's the farmers versus the shepherds is one of the analogies. The Hebrew prophets are the shepherds from out in the countryside. They're totally patriarchal. People living in the cities like Sodom and Gomorrah are the farmers. They are the ones because the farmers created the first settlements, which became the cities. So they have these goddess traditions were at the heart of the city culture. It's kind of like today's liberals and conservatives. Like the conservatives are out in the country, not liking the liberals living in the cities with their wild, like, licentious lifestyles. It's literally the same analogy in the ancient world. That was what kind of blew my mind when I was getting into this research. I was like, holy cow, this totally is directly parallel to today's culture wars. Like trans people are also a big part of it. They have trans priests and they celebrate transgender folks. We're also part of it. So they're also in the temple, and they're also they're the male version of the Kadesh is called the Kadesh, and they're mentioned in the Old Testament, but they're only mentioned when they're being thrown out and being purged. But by mentioning them, that means that they were there, because they talk about the reformer kings, King Asa and a couple other ones, King Hezekiah and King Josiah. They chase away the Kadesh, who are the male transgender temple prostitutes. They chased them out of the land. It's the only time they ever mention them is when they're throwing them out. But they were there, and they were a big part of these traditions. They were the high priests and shamans and stuff. And so, before I go on, are you with me there, or do you have any questions about that?
Yeah. So when we're talking about these gods and goddesses, do we look at these as entities, as star beings, as giants, as people, as myth? What do you think
I think that it's directly parallel to the ancient Greeks. One thing is the ancient Greeks and the ancient Hebrews, the Old Testament, are contemporary cultures, and they're existing at the same time, and they're writing their stories at the same time.
Yeah.
So the ancient Greek mythology and the oldest parts of the Old Testament are 100% contemporary with each other, and so it's very similar cultures and very similar ideas of how they saw these are pagan gods. So I think in those days, my notion of it is you would have some people that were deeply just like today, some people that were deeply religious and spiritual and that dove deep into this stuff, and other people that were probably what we would consider pretty secular and non-believers, and they're not really too worried about the gods. I think that part we would be kind of similar to today. You would have some people that are very spiritual and have all sorts of ideas about them. I try not to speculate about what people necessarily believed. I do think that on some levels they knew a lot that got forgotten and we need to rediscover. And on other levels they were kind of ignorant and superstitious. And so there's like a little of both going on. There's like deep wisdom in some veins and real superstition in others.
Now we look at the Catholic Church, right? And so we understand that the word Catholic simply means universal, right? If there's an idea of the one world religion that came about, you have what came through, I guess, through Constantine and, over the years, a compilation. In the Bible, essentially, is like a compilation book of all of the gods, or even the story of Jesus and who these people represented, his disciples, and the pantheon of the 12, and all of these stories, like you said, are like you can find it in Egypt, you can find it in Greek mythology, and really, I've been feeling that you really can't understand the Bible without understanding Greek mythology. It's going to help you fill in some gaps and some holes about who these people are according to their names and those things. But the Catholic Church, in the veneration of Mother Mary, right, and the gods and goddesses of old, is this something that they just kept and held on to by the priest class? Like they wanted
the power of the feminine divine, she just wouldn't be denied. You couldn't get rid of her altogether. So you were asking about the Garden of Eden story, and then we'll get to the Mother Mary, to Virgin Mary, because it all connects. I believe the Garden of Eden story was actually probably one of the later stories written. So you get the two different versions of creation. The first book is, I think, is much older, and then the Garden of Eden story is probably written after the exile to Babylon. And my interpretation of the Garden of Eden story is that Eve represents Asherah and these priestesses and their rituals, and that the serpent was a big part, was a very powerful symbol in the pagan world, an ancient pagan world of wisdom and divination. Moses carries a serpent staff, and he does magic tricks with his serpent. You know, turns it into a, you know, with the Pharaoh. You know that story where he throws a serpent and becomes a cane. You know, becomes a stick. And there's a couple different things Moses does. And the same thing with the burning bush and the tree of knowledge. I believe that these are all symbols of Asherah and Astarte and the pagan goddesses and the Kadesha priestesses. And what that story is saying is that we're putting your priestesses out of business. You women, you will now be subservient to the men. You're not going to have any freewheeling sexual ways. You're not going to be sexually independent any longer. These plant drug rituals, we're not doing that anymore. No more shamanistic, psychedelic plant drugs, because that was a big part of it. They're cannabis and psychedelic mushrooms and things and ergot. There was all sorts of stuff that was going on. They had plant drugs and they knew how to use them, and they did use them ritually. And I think the tree of knowledge represents that. And the reformer Hebrews are saying, well, you can't do this anymore. And everything, the whole story, the pain in childbirth, that's another thing. All those symbols are these reformers putting a new order on gender relations and putting the patriarchy in place. I mean, the patriarchy had been growing for a long time, but this is when it really finally gets codified to say that women are completely subservient. It's a contemporary story of Pandora. You know, Pandora from the ancient Greeks. Like Eve, she was also the first woman. And Pandora was the source of all of men's ills. That Pandora was before Pandora, there was no women. It was like the Smurfs and Smurfette. She was the only woman in a world of men. And she opens up Pandora's box that unleashes all the evils onto the world. Famine, plague, pestilence, murder, evil, everything bad comes from Pandora's box.
Would that be Gaia too? Because all of the different, you know, beings that were coming.
My point is that story was written around the same time as the Garden of Eden story. In both cases, they're saying that the first woman is the source of all men's evils, and men need to keep the women locked down, put aside in the back with the women and the babies. We know with the babies in the kitchen. And none of this, you know, women's independent stuff, because the Greeks and Romans were like super restrictive with their women. The farther back in time you go, the more women had independence and liberty of their own. And as history sort of progressed and civilization progressed, the men over the centuries pulled women's rights away. We can talk about that sort of history of the laws, but you can see it in the laws, how women lose their rights over the centuries. And then it sort of hits this low point around 500 BC when these stories get written. And then going forward, the women really don't have much rights at all.
Staying in the Eden story a little bit, you know, the idea of these different women are goddesses of Eden, you know, Eve and Asherah and those names. You know, it said, you know, something that you mentioned a while ago, that Yahweh had a wife and it was Asherah, right? Where is that highlighted in the scriptures? And did she was she with Yahweh at first and then goes
to really she's Yahweh's mother.
Baal.
She's
okay.
She's El's wife.
Okay.
So when you look in the Bible and you see in the English, you see two different names of God. Sometimes it says God and sometimes it says the Lord.
What about the other titles in that though, like El Elyon, El
exactly,
El
Elohim, El Elyon, El Shaddai? They're all variations on El.
Do you think that those are different pantheons of gods though, or is that just
it's all one God
character? Okay.
El is just one. El is a really prominent and important ancient god that was worshipped for thousands and thousands of years. He has different names. He was called would it be Marduk? He's On and Anu for the Mesopotamians, which is the older version. So he was On, and he's like the universal sky father. He's above all the other pantheons of gods, and he's not really involved in human affairs. He's like distant and far away and out in space and he's not really being actively worshipped. And there you can see in Mesopotamian history how he had been the prominent god at first, and then sort of gets less and less popular as more newer gods replace him. And he just becomes, he's just like distant. He's like not really involved. He's like creating the cosmos. He's not messing around with little tiny humans. It's his children that are the pantheon of gods that are actively being worshipped. So for the Greeks, this is Kronos. He was the equivalent of El. All these traditions that are neighbors to one another, the gods map. They just, it's the same pantheon, but they just change the names. The Greeks and the Romans.
I'm trying to get them all mapped out now, just like, myself. So
the Egyptians don't really map. They're a little bit different, but the Indo-European ones, the Greeks, the Romans, the Mesopotamians, the Canaanites, it's all sort of the same pattern with the names just changing. But El was like, he's across all these cultures, and he was really, really old. And so Asherah is his wife, and he's the sky father, heavenly father, and the earthly mother, and they go together. They're like the divine couple.
Yeah.
That are the parents of all the gods. And so Asherah is this, she's the mother goddess. And so when Yahweh comes along, but she is unlike El, she is more involved in human affairs. She is the one thing about the feminine and the masculine, the father is like, he goes out and does his thing, but the mother is right close at hand. You see this with the Virgin Mary. She is the one who you worship in the Catholic traditions because she's going to intercede on your behalf to the God, because she's close to you and intimate. Mother Earth is close to us and intimate. You can touch her, you can feel her, you can smell her, you can dig your fingers into the dirt. And like, that's the flesh of Mother Earth. The Sky Father, he's like out there someplace, but the mother is close. And so Asherah was close. And so you have these Asherah poles that most of the time when you see the name Asherah in the Old Testament, it's about 40 times. Most of those times is talking about the Asherah pole that they keep cutting down. It's a wooden totem pole is what it is. It's just like a Native American totem pole. It's the same tradition, really. And so they keep cutting down these totem poles. The Asherah pole would either stand inside the temple or it'd be right next to the altar of the main god, because that's the mother goddess giving her approval to whichever one of her sons is going to become king of the gods. Mm-hmm. She gives her approval, and then El stamps it with his authority. And so Asherah is worshipped alongside Baal. She's worshipped alongside Yahweh. And we have evidence of this from archaeology now, of this going on. So a lot of people say Asherah will be Yahweh's wife, but really she's Yahweh's mother. But it's that she is close at hand.
Where does Aster or Astarte come into the picture early on?
So she's there all along. She's actually more popular. She is Ishtar. She's the same as Ishtar of Babylon. So she's the goddess of love and war. So it's she's Aphrodite, but with war powers. So the Romans called her Venus. The Greeks call her Aphrodite. She is the most popular deity in the Bronze Age. Aside from the king of the gods, she's the queen of heaven. She's the most popular female, and she is the goddess of all this ritual prostitution. She is not a patriarchal goddess. She does not bow down to any male figures at all. She does not bow down to her husband. She does not bow down to her father. She is always trying to she's super ambitious and always trying to get power for herself. She wants the power and the glory, and she's not monogamous. She's super promiscuous.
I was reading the Epic of Gilgamesh the other day, and she tries the wife.
She's a big character in that. Yeah, she's really important.
Gilgamesh, and he wouldn't do it or whatever. He's like, you've got all of these other husbands, and usually their fates end up bad after they give you a child. She was like begging Gilgamesh for a child kind of thing, but she had all of these other children and all these other husbands, hence I guess going to Yahweh and then Baal and these other gods that were seen, known with her in the scriptures. And it seems like the Yahwehists or whatever get upset that whenever she went towards Baal and some of the other gods, maybe they wanted
it's part of the
monogamous relationship.
When Gilgamesh stands up to Ishtar and does not give her what she wants, this is an earlier part of the same long epic where the men are standing up to the goddess and eventually going to knock her right off her pedestal altogether. But Gilgamesh is he's also one of these shepherd kings. He's in the same thread of the Hebrew prophets, of the Hebrew kings. And so he is and this is an earlier start of the rebellion against the goddess when Gilgamesh is like, no, I'm not gonna give you what you want, and they insult her, and and she gets really upset about it. It's later on that the Hebrew prophets are continuing in the same vein, and they will eventually knock her off her pedestal altogether. But in the Old Testament, King Solomon is worshiping her. So all the stuff for King Solomon, they talk about worshiping the goddess of his brides. Like he's talking about Astarte. And the Song of Songs, Song of Solomon, is part of this liturgy from the sacred marriage was their big important ceremony. And so the Song of Songs is part of this genre of sacred love poetry that was read in these sacred marriage ceremonies. And this is, for whatever reason, it survived into the monotheistic era. We could have the scholars can debate as to why they kept it. Scholars will say it was written later. I don't actually think that's true. I think it's really old.
Yeah.
And it was just I think the language got updated over time, but I think the original Song of Songs is probably really, really, really old. And it's definitely part of this sacred marriage liturgies.
Yeah, so it's so funny we talking about the Christian mystics, and they're like really big on that text, and they kind of look at it as their love song towards the Creator, between them and the Creator. But I guess if you're a child of that God, you're remembering the love story of your parents in a sense, right? It's this ancient
It's
song
a universal love story. You can look at it in so many different layers. It's such when I went back to like studying the Bible again to write this book, the parts of the Old Testament that instantly became my favorites were the 3 parts by King Solomon: Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Songs. These are I think anyone who, I don't care what you're spiritual or if you're an atheist or not, if you can't appreciate those 3 books just on their own merits as literature and philosophy, I don't know what to say. I just think you have to be able to those books are incredible. And they're still stand up right now. I think you still get wisdom out of those 3 books. And the Song of Songs in particular is, it's the only romantic, like, I don't want to say sexy, but just like sensual part of the Bible. And it's the only part where the woman really has a voice, where she's really, there's some warrior women. There are other voices of women, obviously, in the Bible, but it's the only part that's like really romantic and where you get like a lovey-dovey voice of women. I think Song of Songs is great.
Well, with that being
a lot
said,
of ways to look at it.
We hear the idea of Sophia, or wisdom, the voice of wisdom and the spirit of wisdom. Yep. And it's like a woman, and it's spoken about in, Song of Songs, Song of Solomon, and really anywhere in the New Testament that you see the word wisdom, it is Sophia, and she had children. And all of those things. Where does her story come into play in the mixture with these other goddesses? No,
that's perfect, because King Solomon is the one who bridges, in my opinion, the gap between the pagan sort of these pagan visions of the goddess, and he is the father of the wisdom traditions. He's the one who starts forward this idea of the feminine as wisdom, and as Sophia is actually just the Greek word for wisdom. And so in the Greek text, the word is just written as Sophia. But King Solomon, those texts are written in Hebrew. So they don't use the word Sophia, but he is the one who calls wisdom she. It's in Proverbs where I don't have the quotes right in front of me, but there's multiple times where he describes, I was with Yahweh at creation. I guided Yahweh's hands as he laid the cornerstones of the foundation of the world. I'm not getting those quotes exactly right. But you know what I'm talking about. They're in Proverbs. And if you read the text closely, you realize that like they're describing wisdom as like his own female goddess. Like that's a goddess. Yeah. Like that's not just like an amorphous thing. It's like that's really a goddess that they're talking about there. And that's King Solomon giving us the wisdom traditions. And it is these goddesses. And yes, it becomes Sophia. So as you get into the Middle Ages, it's Sophia and the Virgin Mary are like the big representations of the feminine divine that carry forward in the Catholic era.
My studies are showing me how all of this has been hidden in the analogy of the scriptures. Like once you start breaking down the Greek terms, like you get the names of these gods that are forgotten, whether they're from, most of them are going to be from Greek, but their stories, like you said, correlate to Hebrew. You can find the Hebrew equivalent, right? They go back and forth, and they're going to help you understand each other, really. But there's the writings of Paul that talks about like so many scriptures where he says that you need to seek after love, charity, and wisdom, but the greatest of these being charity. And these are different Greek goddesses that were usually the daughters of Sophia, like in the Greek mythology, and their names are kept in there. That even your Christians today who are in love
Yeah, I
with
mean,
the
he was
Bible,
speaking to a pagan audience, so like he was using the language of the day and using the metaphors that
yeah,
people would have understood.
yeah, and it still fits the context. So like a lot of people try to look back in the words and say, well, they had a God for everything, but these gods are in context. These stories of all of the gods that are mentioned are like even in the New Testament are in the context of their story to really get a bigger chunk of what was being discussed. You really have to go understand the Greek mythology in their story, and then read that wisdom section again from the Bible, and it'll unpack so much for you. And I'm just finding so many gods within the New Testament.
There's a really another nice one in the Wisdom of Solomon, which is from the Apocrypha. The apocryphal text, which is quasi Old Testament, and the one that's it's on my website. Waters were already there. The waters is what everything was born from. So Asherah was the Lady of the Sea. That was her title. They didn't call her Mother Earth. They called her the Lady of the Sea because for them, this is back in the flat Earth times. They saw everything coming out of the oceans. All life was born from the primordial salt waters. And so Asherah was the Lady of the Sea, and Gaia played that same equivalent. She was a primordial mother goddess that gave birth to her own husband, which was the father of Kronos. That was Uranos. Kronos killed Uranos for him to become king. And so she was the first mover of creation. She's the mother of all. And she was a virgin because she was all alone. So the very first mother of all was all by herself. She had to give birth to her own mate. So that's why she was the virgin mother. And the whole universe is born from a virgin mother. So Gaia is just one version of these stories. You've also got
would that be Eden by any means? Do you think that would tie into Eden, or would be more of Eve, or maybe both?
Well, it's important to remember that these stories are being written thousands of years apart. So you've got like different versions of these stories from much different millennia. The Sumerians have a primordial mother goddess whose name is escaping me at the moment, Namu, and she was very kindly. She gives birth to El and Ki, Ninhursag. Ki was the Mesopotamian mother goddess, the Sumerian. And then later generations, they've got Tiamat, who in the Babylonian, like 1,000 years later, they write another version of the creation, which is very similar to the opening lines of Genesis, that has Tiamat as a primordial mother goddess. But now Tiamat's become like a villain, and they need to like get rid of Tiamat. And then later you get the Genesis story, which is 1,000 years after that. And now they've even taken away her. They don't name her. The waters are there, but they take away her name. They take away her identity.
The deep, the waters were upon the face of the deep. I think the deep is what you're going to get.
Exactly. Tiom is the Hebrew word for the deep, and it's a cognate of Tiamat. And so, yeah, scholars have identified that these connections between the Enuma Elish is that story about Tiamat. Mm-hmm. That's the Babylonian creation myth. Scholars have there's an entire genre of literature on the connections between Genesis 1 and the Enuma Elish, and that Tiamat, Tiom, the waters, that's all related. But what I'm going to get at is that they go from a kindly mother goddess to a villain mother goddess to a mother goddess that doesn't even have a name. They don't even call her a goddess anymore because they want to have just a male god does everything on his own without any sex, without any mother, any being involved. And that's kind of part of the story of knocking the mother goddess off of her pedestal.
Yeah.
Over like a period of thousands of years.
Yeah, but we see a return, a rise, right?
You mentioned she's coming back.
I mean, you even mentioned flat Earth. Flat Earth. The times of flat Earth. It's like, hold on, you should see my timeline. Like all my friends are super obsessed with it, like madly, like it's become their religion, kind of thing.
Well, I don't know where you stand on flat Earth, but I don't really get how anyone can not think the Earth is round, because like it's really quite easy to see the Earth is round if you go out on a boat, out on the ocean, or if you go out on an airplane. Like your eyes aren't lying to you when you see the Earth curving.
You're making a lot of people mad right now.
So yeah, I've seen the Earth curvature with my own two eyes, so I'm not
Mhm.
really quite sure where people get on that.
But these. So as far as the veneration of the mother, right? So we still have Catholicism, which is Mary, which is huge, right? Which she's being venerated there. And then we have
But not as
Easter.
a goddess. She's been demoted. She's like semi-divine. She's almost divine, but she's by Catholic tradition, she's a person. She's not a goddess. She's a person because there can only be one male god, right? That's a part of this. Why I don't
Okay.
part which I don't call myself a Christian because there is by Christian dogma and doctrine there is no mother goddess.
Mm-hmm.
And
But
in my worldview,
but
there is.
you can still see the veneration there versus,
But
like you
culturally,
said, coming to
because
Protestantism.
you couldn't really get rid of her altogether.
Yeah.
You couldn't eliminate her. She just because she's part of our reality. She is. We still have Mother
It's
Earth.
like we're
Even
still hanging on. I mean, Easter, right? Celebrating Easter, and right. So there's still this, you know, remembrance that's going on for some reason. What do you think that reason is that maybe an organization like the Catholic Church would still, they can't come out and tell you right straight up. I mean, they talk about Lucifer, they talk about Venus from time to time. But it's in codes, it's in pictures kind of thing versus coming out and saying we worship the goddess. Ishtar.
part of it is just practical. It's like as one religion overtakes another, they incorporate the old holidays and the old festivals and just rename them and rebrand them. It's like a corporate rebranding. So Easter, a springtime resurrection festival of a dying and rising God, was actually just a really ancient tradition already. That's what these mystery religions were already doing, springtime resurrection festivals. Except the Christians, they just make it no longer about nature and they turn it into a linear, this God isn't coming back again to celebrate the seasons. He's going to heaven and staying there. And it's a linear, eternal thing, not a cyclical thing. But at a practical level, it was a springtime holiday that we had, just like we have a wintertime solstice holiday that gets rebranded as Christmas, but there had always been some kind of holiday going on at that week of the year forever. Just like there's always an autumn, there's always seasons in the autumn. There's always a holiday in the autumn for harvest. There's always holidays in the summertime for the summertime solstice and the wintertime equinox, what I meant to say. You know what I'm saying? Like as you just,
oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, why start a new one? I mean, because they are solar and lunar holidays, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? The goddess of the moon. Well, I know that we have the two lights in Genesis, and one for the day, one for the night, and they trace back to the goddesses, at least the moon, right?
Yeah. So that was more Egyptian to make the sun because in Egyptian traditions actually don't really map to the Indo-Europeans. They would be like forcibly mapped on later on, but they have a different root. So for them, Ra is the sun god, was the creator, and the moon gets associated as female. Not exactly a mother goddess, but like it is female. And then as you go into the Middle Ages, after like Alexander the Great, the Greeks take over Egypt and everything, and you start to see all this synchronization of the Greek gods with the Egyptian gods, and you see the rise of the sun god becomes really popular in Europe. And along that, you get these moon goddesses, so like Luna and all these various iterations of moon goddesses that totally carry forward all the way through, the Middle Ages. And even in the Catholic era, the paganism never completely went away in Europe. Out in the countryside, they were still worshiping Diana. So Diana was like Artemis, and she was a chaste goddess. So she's not super sexual. So that's one of the reasons why she remains popular, because the Middle Ages, they weren't celebrating, women's freewheeling sexuality. So, but a chaste goddess was still okay. And so Diana remained very popular, and she becomes Wonder Woman. She literally becomes Wonder Woman today and never went away. It's exact. You can draw a straight line between Wonder Woman through the Middle Ages, through Diana, right back to the ancient Greek traditions of the Amazons. There is a direct line, and it just shows how these cultural continuities just continue sort of organically on their own without any organization or anyone doing it on purpose, or there's nobody ordering it to happen. It just happens at a bottom-up cultural level because it just springs eternal.
Well, that's the big question, though, mentioning with Marvel, right? Marvel is a god, right? And they all of the majority.
The DC comics especially are
DC,
DC,
all of them.
Justice League is like a mapping of these Indo-European
Well,
gods.
yeah. Well, listening to the what is it, Inish or whatever it's called, they talk about the Avengers, the avenging gods, right? So you have these Avenger friends that come together, right, and who are fighting against the other gods, right?
But
And
yeah, I mean, comic book characters and pagan gods are like totally they map up completely, and they're very much inspired by modern comics. Are totally inspired. And one thing I find very interesting is how in comics there's no doctrine or dogma either. Like how many different versions of Batman's origin story
I
have you
know,
seen?
right?
Or
Yeah.
how many different versions of Spider-Man's origin story? And you're allowed to do it. You're allowed to keep writing new stories as long as you hit certain beats. You know, for Batman, you know, it's got to be that his parents are killed in front of him. It's got to be that he discovers the cave underneath his mansion. You've got to have certain beats have got to be there. Spider-Man's got to be a teenage Peter Parker gets bit by a radioactive spider. As long as you have certain details are there, you're free to change all the other unimportant details.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's lots of different stories. So the poet has license to elaborate these stories however they're inspired, as long as certain beats are kept and certain details are kept. It was the same thing with these old pagan traditions. They could rewrite these mythologies over and over again as long as certain parts of the tradition are kept. And that's what I find so interesting and inspiring and beautiful about these stories, is that when you start to piece them together and put them like in a historical timeline, you see the continuity through history.
Yeah. And I wonder, we talk about them coming back and their names hidden and being remembered. That's an interesting thing. Even in the Hebrew, you're getting like your names will be remembered. There will be a remembrance for you. Even though you're gone, there'll be a memorial kind of thing, right? And even in these stories that are being retold, we got, the movie The Eternals, which has Gilgamesh in it, and all of these other, the pantheon of gods and all of these things that is being reintroduced, even by name, some of them, to a brand new generation. And you've got little kids that are more like into Thor and Odin and Loki and all of these eternal ancient gods that were the heroes of old, were the giants, were the men of renown from the beginning. But we're dressing up as them for conventions and for Halloween and birthday parties, and the kids have the outfits of Spider-Man and all of these gods. So it's almost rivals religion to a sense, that their stories still hold so much
I mean, this
power
stuff
and
was their popular entertainment. I mean,
Yeah.
there was no separation of like
That's how they told it,
spirituality
right?
and culture. And so these mythologies were their pop. This is when you went to get, and when you saw, theater performers perform a show, it'd be one of these mythological stories. And there just was no separation in the culture. So, I would love to see all these modern Hollywood storytelling capabilities be used to tell more deeper, more spiritual stories, and not just have these superficial facsimile of a mythology. Like, let's do some new mythology. Like, why not? Like, I'm all for it. Like, we can either retell these old stories or write new stories or adapt the old stories. I love all that stuff. I love when they adapt these mythologies for modern day. I think it's really cool.
Yeah.
And if they got more spiritual and insightful, all the better.
So here's the thing for a lot of them. So this happens a lot. I mean, it's everything in Hollywood almost. There's nothing new under the sun, right? And so these stories that are being retold. There's certain things that you have to stay true to the story. Is this something you mentioned, like Easter and the veneration of the holidays and the stars? That's something that happens every year, right? The equinox and spring, all of that just comes into play. So it's there for us. But what about some of these older stories, which are probably taken from stars and the birth and death of the saviors, right? Is that something that people in Hollywood are well studied on, and they're like, let me retell the story of the fallen gods?
Your modern day educated liberals are all atheists. I mean, at least the culture is totally atheistic, and they don't want to talk about spirituality. This is what I found in trying to market my book, is that folks like you are interested in like mystics and stuff, but like your educated liberals nowadays, like they're not into spirituality at all.
Yeah, the most of the Christians
mock it.
well, most of the Christians would argue and say, no, they are well studied. All of these writers, and we know like Tolkien and these guys were, though, you know, they like believed in Atlantis and the fairies and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah, Tolkien's
maybe
older
not the
generation.
producers, right? But it's the same stories though. So do you think it's just natural these stories are coming out? Like, because we look at like J.J. Abrams.
I don't mean to say they don't study the stories. Actually, they study the stories quite a bit.
Okay.
But they do it from an atheistic perspective where they want to like deconstruct. People are very into, and I don't mean to generalize too much when I say they, there's lots of different people out there doing lots of different things. But there is a real trend to, I noticed this, there's a lot of people, maybe it's just people I was talking to, but who have left the church. They were they may have been evangelicals or really, real fundamentalists. And they left the church. They studied it so much that they realized that like it wasn't making sense. And so then they started like deconstructing, and then they studied the Bible a lot in order to deconstruct Christianity and make it be not true.
Yeah.
I understand where they're coming from,
which is a phase that a lot of people.
The stories aren't literally true. Yes, these stories are not literally true. None of them are, in my opinion. Not the Bhagavad Gita, not the Bible. None of these stories, they're not meant to be literally true. They're not meant to be taken that way. They're all spiritual.
They're true to me,
stories.
damn it.
But not history, they're spiritual stories. They're more important than like literal truth. Like that's not the way they're being written. That's not the way they're meant to be interpreted. And that's what I was taught in church, frankly, was not to read the Bible literally.
Really?
So it's not that all
the church told you that.
I don't know where I picked that up, but like we would interpret the stories like in Sunday school.
Really?
Like I went to a Presbyterian church in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And we would interpret the stories like Jesus with the story of with the 7 loaves and fishes. When I was taught that story in Sunday school, it was all about how, the disciples brought out the bread and fish that they had, but there was this big crowd. But then other people were like, oh, well, I've got a little bit too, because people didn't actually come out there expecting to be fed. They all came out there for a picnic. So people brought their own food, and they all it became like a big potluck, basically. Everybody started busting out the little bit of snacks that they had brought for themselves. And when everyone put everything they had brought on the table, all of a sudden there was plenty of food for everybody. And it was like the story of sharing and charity and a potluck. That was the way I was taught the story in Sunday school. And it was not seen as a big, supernatural miracle.
Yeah.
But that was the kind of church I went to. We didn't go for supernatural miracles.
So that's what we have now. I mean, we're taking all of this literal. We're taking Revelations literal. We're taking the miracles of Jesus literal, and I got so many friends who are out praying for blind people, and thinking that their eyes are going to be opened up and stuff, and they can't see that it was a spiritual blind or a spiritual sleep, that understanding the Greek gods, there was a god named Hypnos, which is the word from sleep in the New Testament, that was putting the ancient gods to sleep. And he said, oh, they're not dead, they're just asleep. And they're in Tartarus, right? They're only, they're not dead, they're alive. And he went to Tartarus, like all of these stories that are in there, but for some reason it makes us feel like it's more real if we, read it literal. And I've always said, like, it doesn't matter, like if whoever comes out and, yes, we made these stories up, they are taken from so and so gods, or they are the, we made it up. It doesn't change anything. Like, the only thing that changes is if go back to what you said, if you read the stories and you get the morals, you get the really deep spiritual philosophy, I would say, the myth that is hidden from the masses who take it literal. The masses take it literal. They can't see the underlying message about humanity, about time, and all of this stuff.
The Christian church teaches us to read it literally. I mean, one thing I've noticed in the study of all this archaeology, all the archaeology and scholarship that's come out in the last 150 years or so has really challenged traditional Christianity in a way that Christians find very threatening. But if you notice, the Jews, they're doing all the same work over in Israel. In fact, they're doing a lot of the archaeology themselves. They're not bothered by it at all. The Jews are not, they don't read their text literally either. For them, it's something to study and interpret and understand, and they go through these rabbinical traditions, but they're not bothered in the least by the stuff the archaeologists have been pulling up. They say, wow, isn't that interesting? And they're like, wow, they were pagans, huh? That's funny. And they like just don't, it doesn't even bother them at all. But Christians are extremely bothered by it. And it's, you know, and they're looking at the same archaeology, the same data, the same science.
Cognitive dissonance, though. Nope, that's made up. That's
cognitive
fake.
dissonance.
Yeah. You guys are trying to disprove Christianity. And so we can't even look at the similarities, and you know, that's the crazy. So I think what opened the door for me personally was syncretism, right? Is to begin to study these other traditions and seeing the similarities versus from my tradition of Christianity was very, you know, debate and speaking down to people about why this was the only way kind of thing. And learning, and I would study other religions to point out the differences, right? And they are there. We have the differences, right? But when you start studying the similarities, you're like, wow. Even in the stories in Gilgamesh and in the flood and releasing a dove out of the, you know, out of the ark or the boat that he was in, you know, and there's just too much. And then seeing which ones are older. And for me, it was like, not just for me, but for many people, whenever around 2010 or so, maybe a little bit before that, whenever the Zeitgeist came out and Jordan Maxwell's work really kind of took off and blew up. And a lot of people saw it because of that documentary of how there were borrowed gods, right? The stories were borrowed and they were told thousands of years before. And that fear that was released. And many of my Christian friends who would consider themselves theologians, right? Who are given over to study and learning and have dedicated their life to this. And now they've kind of been told that it was a lie or it was borrowed or they're stolen from a pagan tradition. And the deeper and deeper and deeper you go, you find out that all of it was. None of it was original, you know?
Yeah, well, I agree. Actually, I do think they make some contributions. My understanding of this, I hear everything what you're saying right there. Mm-hmm. And in my studying, in learning that the historical Israelites were pagans, and that this is all part of like a reform within the pagan community, to me has deepened my understanding of it all. Because like I remember specifically being taught, again, back in Sunday school, you know, what was the difference between the first temple and the second temple? And being taught like, oh, there wasn't much difference. Like they were doing the same stuff in the first temple and the second temple. That is just completely not historically accurate at all. First temple was wildly different than the second temple. And like I said before, we would not even recognize what was going on in the first temple. It was full on pagan, whatever they were doing.
Well, you're mentioning these grain offerings and stuff too. And like, and in killing animals on the altars, like this, the way we've interpreted and we look at this stuff, I think it's more, I won't say sinister, or it's darker than we've seen it in the cartoons and in Sunday school, you know, to give offerings to the gods so that the gods would come down and eat, like the traditions of gods coming down from the mountain to devour the grain and the crop and the animals that were being slaughtered and those things.
It was a pretty hardcore culture. I think the time period was pretty hardcore. I mean, child sacrifice was reality. Like the Phoenicians, this is a Phoenician culture. This actually goes with the Baal religions. The Phoenicians were the dominant power in the Mediterranean prior to the Greeks. They were really rich. They founded Carthage over in North Africa. They were the dominant trading power prior to the Greeks and the Romans. And they really did do infant sacrifice, and they would slice their babies' throats and burn them in a fire. And they have found the graves in Carthage in particular. And so they have evidence. There's writings of it from the Greeks and the Romans, as well as from the Hebrew prophets. And all three of them all thought it was just grotesque. They all thought the Phoenicians were just completely out of their gourds to be cutting open their babies' throats. They were all completely just, the Greeks and Romans write about it with complete disdain. That they were horrified by what they saw. And the same way the Hebrew prophets were like, do not do this. Yahweh does not want you doing this anymore.
Yeah, he never wanted you to do it. Right? That's what they try to say.
Yeah, so I want to give, I think the Hebrew prophets, there's things to criticize about some of the things they were doing, but like they were pushing forward on morality. They were moral reformers who actually we should offer them some real credit. And like, that's part of what, so on one hand, yes, we were lied to about that there was never a mother goddess and it was Yahweh back since forever. No, actually, no, it was not Yahweh since forever. Yahweh was probably only invented around 1200 BC. Yahweh shows up in the historical record in the Bronze Age collapse and was not an old god.
We're trying to figure out who to worship, man, and what name to call upon, man. Come on, help us.
And so, so yeah, there's all these, like, it's on a historical level, the whole Bible is like propaganda. And I hate to use the word lies because it's like, but it is. But on the other hand, the historical reality was actually really interesting and really cool. And there's a lot to defend and a lot to be proud of because, I mean, who wants child sacrifice? It's totally great that we move beyond that. And these public sex rituals, now I'm all for sexual liberation and all, but like, I don't think we need to be having public orgies to make the grain grow. Like, I don't think that's actually like, because that's really what they were doing. Like they had, I mean,
that's where the sacrifices came in too, right?
What's that?
I said that's where the sacrifices and stuff came in too, right?
Yeah, the sacrifices. I mean, the animal sacrifices, that would, all that food would get eaten, so it wasn't going to waste. That would like become like a big barbecue. But they didn't eat the babies. The babies really were just being a sacrifice. And you know, so I think there's a lot of credit to be given to these reformers that it took them centuries to overcome some of this stuff. Meanwhile, I think they go overboard on getting rid of the divine feminine altogether. So like, I see it both ways. I see that there's stuff to be proud of and stuff to be like slightly horrified by, which is like so much of human history, which is full of paradoxes. Like as a white Protestant, I'm proud of my family's heritage at founding, you know, being part of what Western civilization became, you know, with the Industrial Revolution, but I'm also horrified by the legacies of slavery and genocide of the natives. And I have to own both of that history, like my own family name. Like I have to own both of that. Like my family is a part of like helping to build this country, and my family played a part in all these sins and crimes too. And like, you have to hold both those at the same time. And the same thing goes true for the Old Testament too, and the New Testament.
So you would say, so a Christian should, but can you still be a Christian and know about this stuff? Like, you know, if like,
that's got to be for you to decide. I mean, Christianity is
be a Catholic.
pretty, it's not a flexible theology. It's a very inflexible. There's one way and everything else. That's why I'm not call myself a Christian, because like it's an inflexible tradition. You can't say I worship a mother goddess and call yourself a Christian. No, like that's not, you're not a monotheist anymore.
Now, what about when it comes to Jesus for you, or for not for you, but I mean, what do you think that story was created to do? Does that tell?
I mean, I'm on Team
overview?
Mary Magdalene. When it comes to Jesus, I'm on Team Mary Magdalene. So I'm all about, I think Mary Magdalene was the apostle to the apostles. And when I read, I didn't go too deep into the Gnostic texts, but I've read them some. And what came out of it was a couple things. One was that they also believe in the divine mother, that for the Gnostic Jesus, there is a divine mother who's Sophia, the bride of Christ. There's a lot of different ways to talk about it, but they very explicitly talk about divine mother alongside the Heavenly Father. So I'm on board with that. And I'm on board with Mary Magdalene as the apostle of the apostles. And I'm on board with you know, ignorance being the source of our salvation, ignorance being the source of our suffering, and wisdom being the source of our salvation. I'm on board with that message too. I never really bought into atonement, that the idea that Jesus' death absolved me of my sins. As a child, that did not make sense to me. I'm like, I remember being a kid in church, being like, what did I do 2,000 years ago that Jesus, like, I'm not claiming to not be a sinner. It's not that I don't think I'm a sinner, but like, I don't get how his death absolves me of anything. So I never really was.
Well, can we tie his death in maybe with like Tartarus, with the guys who were trapped there? Maybe his death atoned for them, because when he died, as the story goes, Jesus dies and goes to Tartarus and defeats death. And those names, was it Carthus and the other one, Thanatos or whatever, he goes to hell and defeats them. And the souls that were in hell, which it says that it was Tartarus, which is just a holding place, it wasn't a place of torment. They couldn't go back into heaven because they were sinners or whatever. Jesus goes there, and his blood frees them. He preaches to the soul, led captivity captive, and then they they raise from the dead, and they go and preach to their family members before ascending with him 40 days later when they ascend. So with this blood and atonement covering the sins of the world, many people even interpret that world of just being the Israelites at that time, or maybe the souls that were waiting and needed release and freedom. Now you have an example why you need to be a good person versus you can do bad and Jesus is going to cover your sins kind of thing, because there is this so much of like the idea of, listen, be a good person. Listen, every man will give an account for everything that he does. Don't just say the blood covers it and you get to do whatever you want. Like, because I've been studying a lot of the ascension stuff of like, you getting in different levels of heaven, if you will, and those kind of things. And but then we have the blood of Christ and the atonement, but maybe the atonement for those who had no atonement before. What would you say to that? Just as a theory,
I'm open to interpretations. I think that I think there was Jesus the man, who was a real man, who really did walk the earth and do some amazing things. And I think there's Jesus the God, who inspires Jesus the God. And Jesus the God is what do we want him to be? That we collectively want him to be. I mean, if you just have your own ideas, that's just you with your own opinions. But like collectively, what do we as a group, as a culture, want him to be? And what does it mean for us? And how does it bring out our morality? I mean, that's the most important thing, that is these framing our morality and framing this mysterious. We live in a mysterious universe. Like, we don't know what the fuck is going on. And anyone who claims to know is full of shit, as far as I'm concerned. It's a full-on mystery. And we need to help make sense of these mysteries. And that's what religion does for us. Yes, it's stories and poetry and metaphor, but it helps us collectively make sense and put the mystery in order, and helps us frame things like our morality. Like, what morals do we want? What do we believe? Do we believe that slicing our babies' throats is going to appeal to the gods? Or do we believe something different? I would prefer to believe something completely different than that,
I think most people do. Do you think that there are people who still worship those Phoenician bloody gods? I mean, when we look at our government, there's
also
that they're involved in.
There's also the QAnon conspiracy theories about people drinking blood of babies. I've never seen any evidence of it.
Like wars and like
there's
people dying.
There is a deep culture
that
of
don't
death,
need to die
in our society. The war making, the mass incarceration, the destruction of nature, the pure materialism that says, if I cut everything to pieces and just turn it all into gold and you bathe in my gold plated bathtub. That is a culture of death.
Even the ritual sex parties you were talking about, like.
Well, I mean, I've never seen evidence of,
I've never been to one
drinking baby blood, but we have lots of evidence of Bill Clinton, banging underage girls. Jeffrey Epstein, I don't know about, prepubescent sex, but we have loads of evidence of teenage sex with teenagers. There's no shortage of evidence of that. And Jeffrey Epstein is all the evidence we need that, there are in elite circles, high-end prostitution going on. Are they getting into ritual stuff like in the Eyes Wide Shut movie? I mean, there probably is in some of these circles. I bet there is.
Yeah. What do you think Mardi Gras even, like the real Mardi Gras balls. A lot of these other balls, that's why it scares Christians when they look into the origins of, we go in church and celebrate Easter, but then they didn't. Oh Lord, bunnies. What do bunnies?
So
have
what is
to do
your
with
take
Christ?
on Mardi Gras? Do you have some opinions on?
Well,
that's so deep, because like New Orleans is so deeply Catholic, but also deeply Mardi Gras. All this Creole and all this stuff going on.
Well, you got the veneration of the gods. Every parade is named after the crew of Aphrodite, the crew of Zeus. And so you got all of the people coming into the streets dancing. Listen, dancing is a form of worship. And they're getting intoxicated. Bacchus is there. You're dancing and they're giving you tokens. They're giving you candies and cakes and breads. And the floats come by and the people are elevated, dressed as the gods, giving back to the people offerings. And so it's a Catholic holiday, and you get all of your sin out, you get all of it out of you to prepare for Lent, but just still, again, the veneration of the
It's
old
the same
gods.
cultural continuity I was talking about, like the holidays and these traditions, they just don't go away.
Yeah.
Sex and drugs.
I
and
used to be
dancing.
against it though, but now I'm like coming back to it like, hold on, man, maybe they need to be remembered, man.
So when you were growing up in New Orleans, did you do all the Mardi Gras stuff?
Yeah. And I went through phases where I was totally against it, like exposing it. And I mean, I quit doing Easter. We went straight kosher. We was only doing Jewish holidays for like 8 years and all of that. Like I took it seriously, you know. And so,
Like
but
real Old Testament, like the 12 tribes, folks.
oh yeah. The
Like
culty,
that
the
kind of
culty
thing?
people. Yeah, trying
Yeah.
that. Yeah, what's called they call it like the Hebrew roots movements, and they have different names for it where people are kind
Right.
of going back to that. But you see, as that even like the spiritual look as types and shadows anyway. Like all of that was like symbolic representations of spiritual stuff anyway. When a Christian looks at it, but all of that to say that, which led me to that was looking up Easter, Christmas, Tammuz, all of the veneration of the gods, and I was like, oh my Lord, we're worshiping devils. We don't
Yeah.
know it, but
Well, I mean, you can draw a straight line between Mardi Gras and like ancient Babylon, and like
that
it would
so
be
that led me to be a more of a, what would you call, like a Jewish person. They would a Pharisee, which is a separatist. Stay away from the people of the world. We become more
right,
hermits, which
exactly.
people take that route. But then the more studying you're doing of where I'm separating myself to the Hebraic tradition as being the first people, as being the originators of all of this, and you're like, hold on. You guys took stuff from Egypt when y'all was in bondage. Hold on, you guys are building temples and so there's this sensation, this idea in people, they want to get to the original in a seeker. Listen, if Christianity is a mockery of Zoroastrianism, I need to search that. And if all of that comes from Egypt, then I need to search that. Well, if that comes from Sumer, then I got to go back to. So the truth seekers want to go all the way to the beginning and figure out what was going on. So for them to even, they make fun of me, the real seeker friends who are, because I like Christianity as a modality, right? It works, right? There's rituals, there's things in it that work, and we need law, right? The Moses, the lawgiver, Nomos, the lawgiver, like, there's lawgivers, there's ordinances and things, but so for many people it would say, how can you be a Christian and know that it comes from Horus, or know that it comes from, listen, it works, man. Like whatever, because all of those names that I just mentioned, and you mentioned just briefly, the Hindu traditions and the Upanishads and the Gita, and many people believe that Christianity was taken straight from the Hindu tradition, especially when we're going back to the oldest, when we got to compare the timelines and see who was first, because like whoever was first, they were essentially the originators, But it's bringing me a little bit of solace to see that this is something that happened globally, if you will. Like you said, the Hebrews and the Greeks are telling the same story, and also the Canaanites, and also Egypt, and all of these cultures are telling a very similar story about the star people, the gods that seeded them here, and what happened to them. So the circle, for me, a lot of it's come full circle to now just to be open to have the conversation and not be offended, which is probably where a lot of Christians listening to this are right now.
Yeah. I'm not here to get cause offense to anyone. I can only say what I've learned and what I see.
That's all you can do.
One thing I learned, I was saying, I left the church when I was 18, but I never became an atheist, and I started getting into comparative religion in those days, and was reading a lot of for different reasons, I was getting into Hindu stuff. And what I saw was that the Christian mystics and the Hindu mystics, like that their worldviews totally dovetail. When you get away from the doctrine and dogma and just go for like the spiritual pursuit of just like understanding reality and the nature of God and stuff, and as close as we can figure it out, that the Christians, or it doesn't matter what tradition you come from, Hindus, Christians, Buddhists, Muslims, they all start to dovetail in their beliefs. I mean, they can look at different aspects of it, but really they're not going to be contradicting one another. And truth doesn't contradict truth, and wisdom doesn't contradict wisdom. There's just different slices of it that we're looking at, because it's so big you can't look at it all at once. And so there's that. So like for me, that was always very important, was the idea that if I'm interested in trying to, you know, be more spiritual and stuff, it doesn't really matter which modality I choose from. They've all got their values. So I can learn a lot from Christian traditions, or I could dive into like Sufi Muslim traditions and learn something there, or I can dive into, you know, any number of different traditions. But you got to pick one. It's like, which version of exercise do you want to do? Do you want to do Tai Chi, or do you want to do, you know, are you going to be a marathon runner? Like, you got to pick something and sort of go with it. But then also I learned that about the mother and about relative to monotheism was that part of the definition of monotheism is that it's the father alone and there is no mother. And this is for the Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike, that there is no, officially speaking, a recognition of a divine mother. Now, there is at a cultural level where the people, it's still there in the society, because at a bottom up level, she never goes away. But from a top down level, they very explicitly throw the mother out. And that this was like what's happening with Asherah in the Old Testament, is that they're very much explicitly throwing her out. And then when she becomes a Virgin Mary, and for the Christians, she's very explicitly not a goddess, and she's very explicitly, you know, not divine. And so this is a part where like, say, comparing Christians with the Hindus, where it doesn't map up. So like, you can take a Christ consciousness from a New Agey Christian perspective and map it up with Krishna consciousness, and like, you know, like Deepak Chopra or somebody, and like it all aligns. But when you work back, but the Hindus also have these really robust traditions of their goddesses, Parvati and Kali, and these really amazing goddesses that are incredibly powerful, that are very deeply important in Hindu traditions. And they don't map out to the West at all. There is none of these, like only in these sort of broken up, kind of fragmented ways, but they don't have a robust goddess, because for the Hindus, every god comes with a goddess. They all come in pairs. And we don't see that in monotheism. And that's where I break. And again, why I don't call myself a Christian.
I mean, do you think we saw that in early Hebrew tradition, though?
Yeah, that's what they're getting rid of. Okay. Asherah. Oh no, there
was always a correspondence, mapping. Right? With
no, there is 3 goddesses that show up in the Old. I mentioned 2 that are by name, and then one is unnamed. That's Anat, and if you know who Kali is of the Hindus, like the goddess of death, who's like dripping in blood with a skull necklace, and you know who I'm talking about?
Oh yeah.
She maps out to Anat, who is the 3rd one of these goddesses, who I call her she who must not be named, because she was so terrifying that they couldn't even insult her. Asherah and Astarte are only mentioned when they're being like sort of insulted or denigrated. But Anat, she's so powerful they can't even insult her, because she was actually powerful enough to defeat El. And she would challenge El in the Canaanite mythology. She tells El, I'm going to throw you down and smash your skull and make your gray beard run with blood. So they can't even like have her in the stories at all. But we know from scholarship that she was part of the culture. So yeah, there was explicit matching between Asherah, Astarte, and Anat, and the Hindu goddesses of Parvati, Durga, and Kali, which is a Hindu triple goddess. And so, yeah, the monotheists are trying to get rid of those goddesses and just have the males, fathers alone. And so this is where I break from that tradition, and I want to be a part of putting the mother back on her pedestal. So that, by definition, that means I can't be a Christian. I can't call myself. But I do go to Quaker meetings, and I do like appreciate, you know, a lot of the, you know, the benefits of the Protestant. I still consider myself a child of Martin Luther. He said, go read the Bible for yourself and figure out what it means. And that's kind of what I did for myself, you know.
Mm-hmm. And look where we ended up. Man. So again, with the Catholic thing, so for the lay people, you have the priest class who are privy to the deeper knowledge, right? And then we give it to you in parables, right? But those of you who understand, you'll eventually become priests, as Jesus says you are. You are kings and priests and princes as well. I feel like the higher ups, again, and even in Catholicism, see Mary as a goddess, even though they wouldn't maybe tell the people, but I think that the iconography, the veneration, even being more than Jesus. I tell you this, I recently got into looking up the Catholic saints of old, looking into Christian mysticism, if you will. Teresa of Avila, learning her story, learning the stories of the patron saints of my birthday. I'm finding some like really wild spiritual stuff that they encountered. It's really cool. So I started getting into some of that in the iconography, and I'm studying, and then I find I'm doing my study in the New Testament, and Paul is dropping the names of love, right? He's like, you got love, you got filio or phileo, and you got so many different words for love in the Greek, but in the English in the West, we just have one word, love. Obviously, because do you love pizza? Yeah, I love pizza. Well, do you love your child? Yeah, I love my child. We should
have more different words for different types of love,
And so they have different types of love. I don't love pizza like I love my child, so it's a personification of a deeper.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, right. Pizza's really good. But they have personifications in deeper words, and so it's even like kept within the context of the New Testament of Jesus talking to Peter about how much do you love me? Do you agape me? Well, no, I don't agape you. Do you phileo me? Phileo me? Well, yeah, I phileo you. Well, are you willing to give your life for me? Or you just like me like everybody else, kind of thing. So it really helps you. Obviously, breaking that down will help you understand the context of it. But those are goddesses. Those are goddesses that are mentioned in Sophia. Wisdom has daughters, and these daughters are Charity or Charis. These daughters are Pistis, and there's a bunch of daughters that they have. So I'm only finding this through breaking down the Greek New Testament. I'll find a word that has a substance to it. And if it's love, if it's charity, if it's faith, if it's law, if it's sleep, anything. And they're all going back to Greek gods in their context, which is blowing my mind. And I'm just writing them all down only from the New Testament, And so I'm finding faith, hope, love, charity. They're together. These three are one. This is, so wisdom is the mother of all of them, which is Sophia. And then I'm looking up Sophia's legacy and her mythology, and she's the mother of those three. And I thought, that's really cool, man. I want to be able to show people that, how that's hidden in there. And then I'm looking up the Catholic iconography and the saints and stuff. And me and my wife are having this conversation, like, are these real people? Like, did they really do this? Because there's some far out stuff. I was like, makes it seem like it's tangible for me if they were real, but I don't know because some of the stuff is so far out.
Some of them really old ones were like, there's so many different saints, so there's different stories for different ones, but some of them really were like pagan gods that they just reinvented.
Well, I said all of that to try to say.
And then some of them were real people that they sanctified, and then some of them were like not even nice people at all. They were like some of the people that did, because like when Christianity became the state religion of Rome in the 4th century AD, they shut down all the pagan temples with force, like with violence, and like there was like mob violence to like close these temples, and that played out over like 100 or 200 years, and so some of these guys that led these really violent purges, they got sainted as well. So like there's a mixed bag of characters in there.
Well, I found Sophia and her 3 children who are supposed to be
and are they
supposed to
saints?
Be, yeah, and they give them stories like they were people, and they venerate them as saints. And I'm like, hold on, they're in Greek mythology. So how are we? Hold on, which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? So did this family come about first, which we highly doubt it, because that word is much older, right, than the Greek New Testament, if you will, and so or even Christianity, to be exact, because Greek theologies, like you said, dates back towards the Hebrew versus the New Testament. So I thought that was really interesting, like in doing the study of these saints or whatever, these holy people who are also they're hidden in the stories of the gods and goddesses, even the lesser gods, Sophia and her children, charity, love, and faith, and grace, and all of these beautiful women, which essentially you can tie those into the nymphs of the Pleiades, which are the 7 sisters, and all of these things are telling this beautiful story, and a lot of it complements each other. So I'm kind of finding so much beauty in the compliments there.
Yeah, I think these are beautiful stories too, and I think there's a lot to learn from them.
Question I got for you, because we're talking about the myth and we're talking about don't take it literal, you fall into error, sectarianism, you fall in so much error when we take stuff literal, right? But then we got the idea of, and they say where the Bible went wrong is where they use literal places. They use people's names and families and stuff that attributed to gods.
There are parts of it that are based on history. Like the books of First and Second Kings are like, these are all historic. Like all the people in there are all historical people, as far as I'm concerned. Like every single one of them, or mostly anyway. Certainly, it's tracking the history of in terms of all the rulers that they're listing, all the kings and stuff.
But you said you also think that a lot of that was done in hindsight too, though, right? So they kind of get to tell their own story. Origin story.
It's like a very propagandistic version of history. It's like if you just read, not even like Fox News, but like what's the most right wing, ultra right wing, One American News version of history, or North Korean, no more like North Korean history. It's like a super
Native American history. Columbus Day. Columbus found the land. We found it. I was like, hold on, it wasn't lost. Like, what are you talking about?
All right, so they're telling their version of history, but they are listing actual events. They are listing actual kings, like the Assyrian kings. When the Assyrians came through and trashed Israel, like that actually happened. And when these various Assyrian rulers moved down or invading, those were historical events. And so from about 850 BC, which is like from after Israel and Judah split, the scholarship and the Bible actually start to line up in terms of events. And so you have parts of the Book of Kings combining First and Second Kings in one book, just called Book of Kings. They're finding like that this battle like actually happened in like such and such battle, but it's only from like, see, there was no literacy. You had the Bronze Age collapse from like 1200 to 1000 BC was like this period called the Bronze Age collapse, and all of the civilizations in the Mediterranean all were completely demolished by like a series of disasters. There was natural disasters, there was famines and plagues and earthquakes, and then a series of invasions and refugees, and the sea peoples were these refugee peoples. There was all these series of disasters that caused all of those cultures to completely implode. And so you have like a 200-year period where there's no governance, there's no literacy. The Greeks called it the Greek Dark Ages. And so the old forms of writing, which was cuneiform, it goes away. And you've got a couple hundred years where there's no writing at all. And then the Greek and Hebrew writing gets invented as like a new form of writing. The Phoenicians invented the phonetic alphabet, and the Greeks and Hebrews copy it. And so that writing starts to appear around 850 BC. And so now we have writing. And so from 850 BC going forward, we have to find, we find these steles that, are monuments up to various kings and commemorating various battles. And they found them all around Canaan. Like the Moabites have a stele that talk about a battle that takes place in the scripture. And you've got Assyrian records that they can track to. You've got Assyrian version of events that talk about stuff that was happening in Israel. So you have like both sides of the story. You can have the Bible and you can track it with all like actual historical records that the archaeologists have found and can now read. And so you can see that. So from 850 BC going forward, like actually the events totally line up. And you can see that the biblical writers are talking about real events. They're just talking about from their own preferred version of history. They leave out all the unfortunate details and just talk about the stuff they want to talk about.
It's like, let's write the goddesses out, Yeah, they were mean, horrible. They were eating people, and they were doing all of these things, never mentioned
a good example is like Jezebel. Queen Jezebel was a real person. She was the queen of Israel. She was a historical queen. She was an actual person. We know her husband was a real person. We know her father-in-law was a real person. We know who her biological father was, a king of a Phoenician king. We know these are real people. We know Jezebel, by inference, was a real, actual historical person. And I perfectly willing to believe that she was truly assassinated and was truly this pagan queen who really did worship Asherah, who really was at war with the Hebrew prophets, because these followers of Yahweh were these reformers. These followers of Yahweh were trying to take her out. So she's trying to take them out. And both sides have got their version of what's happening. Both sides think that they're righteous and the other side's evil, just like you would see it in today's politics. And so, but in the Bible, we just get one version of the events. But Jezebel would have had her version of events.
Yeah.
We just don't see it.
Yeah. Well, I think we see some of it in the, researching the other side and seeing what their history says, if there's any of it left, which obviously is, very little, but, telling the stories, but then adding the myth to it, adding the deity side of it. I mean, we pray before we go to war. We pray before we go to a basketball game, and you'll hear LeBron James or somebody say, yeah, God gave me the ability to win. I prayed and God gave me the power. Like, what if that story was told of this LeBron James, aka King James, who asked his God for power before the finals, and he came through with the last shot? These stories.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, man. The gods of basketball, I talk about that all the time. Which way is the ball going to bounce? Is it going to bounce off the rim and go bing, 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 and fall in to win the championship? That's the gods. I mean, did Tom Brady, did he have the gods on his side or not? Obviously, he had the gods on his side.
It depends on when it was told. Like, if we were reading this from 2,000 years ago, then we're like, wow, there's some intrigue, there's some myth here, because we tried to do that with George Washington. Like the apotheosis of George Washington, him becoming a deity and becoming a god and being like adding God spoke to him in a dream and a vision that showed him things and told him what to write and where to.
Yeah, in a different cultural context, we could totally deify George Washington.
It's almost like we tried, but it's just like, yeah, it didn't really stick because it's too close. But maybe in a couple more 100 years.
It's not our culture to treat people like that way, but the Romans did that. They routinely deified their emperors. We just don't do it in our culture, but it's not to say we couldn't, or that
you think that,
in later years we still could again.
Yeah, time, maybe, again, time, chronos, years later, the people find the book and say, yeah, this guy found a god, came to America and had his ascension in these things, and very strange how, the history, his story, the person who gets to write it can kind of add in whatever they want and kind of color outside of the lines a little bit, But
Absolutely.
with that being the literal story, right, and taking all of it literal, I was going to ask you about, the fascination with ancient aliens, and ancient aliens so big where we take all of that literal and even tying in the, ufology and extraterrestrials with these gods. These gods came from other planets. You mentioned Uranus.
I'm not like, I wouldn't call myself an ancient aliens person, but like I will appreciate the possibility. I am completely open-minded to aliens. I don't have an opinion one way or the other as to whether they're around or not, but I'm not ruling out the possibility. And it wouldn't shock me if it proved to be true. And if they did prove to be true, then the possibility remains that they were around in ancient times as well. And that some things could be attributed to alien encounters. And certainly there's a lot of stuff like in the Gita and in ancient, there's talk about like flying saucers and flying machines in ancient texts. So I don't rule out the possibility, but it's not something I go deep into either. But I'm open-minded. I'm generally a pretty open-minded guy about stuff, unless it seems unless I can see for myself that it's not true.
Yeah, the interesting thing about it, doing the interpretation, which I think we all do, whether we're seeing what is like a story that was written to have moral. Obviously, the scriptures can't be like a straight historical book. I mean, that's where they go wrong, to think it's all or only historical, when like every line has like some encoded keywords and they're telling a really deeper story about morality, about overcoming, about faith, or whatever they are. There's no history book that does that. That's in there. Maybe it's just because we're looking for it and we attribute it to it. There's that aspect too. But reading the Bible,
there's definitely some deeply encoded stuff in the Hebrew text.
For sure. I mean the names,
like the numerology, and it gets really deep. And I think probably some books more so than others. But yeah, it gets like like, again, I think just reading the Bible literally is just short selling the whole thing, because like you've got to be looking for the metaphors, you've got to be looking for the symbolism, you've got to be looking for the hidden text, because like the original Hebrew had no vowels, like, so it's written. Even if you go to read the Hebrew now, the Hebrew translations, those are not the way it was originally written. The ancient Hebrew has no vowels in it. And so a lot of these words have been, they've been guessed at, really. So like there's different ways to reinterpret the original Hebrew text based on putting different vowels in there, which changes, obviously, change the complete meaning of a word. If you have different vowels in there, it could be a completely different word. And so there is a lot you can go into. There's a pretty deep rabbit holes you can go down to
I've
with
been in them.
reinterpreting
I've been in them myself. I'm reading stuff I've never heard before. It's like, are you reading this to your own demise? Are you going down the rabbit holes? For sure, but it's only bad. What if I come back with a rabbit, though? That's the thing, right? Like, I found something here. And a lot of it is ancient alien kind of stuff, or what I said at the beginning sounded like some Tolkien, Lord of the Rings type stuff, to be honest with you, which is really cool. But it's, not looking at these people as regular people, which we've been tricked into doing, to look at Noah as a regular person, or even Moses or his brother Aaron and the divine council, looking at them as Jesus calls them gods in the New Testament, right? When he talks to the the Jewish Pharisees and says, "Does not your scripture say that ye are all gods, sons of the Most High?" But your godhood is being stripped from you, essentially. So these wars and battles of the gods, that I think that's why they line up with the stories in Sumer and the the Canaanite traditions and all of the stories in Mesopotamia and even Egypt, because they're telling the same stories, but maybe from different perspectives.
Yeah. So I just got a couple more minutes here. I'll think bounce off, but so we should aim towards
For sure.
the conclude or wrapping it up here. But yeah. So like I guess I'm curious. I'd like to talk to you again. I'd be happy to talk to you again sometime. If you enjoyed this, I enjoyed it.
For sure. Yeah. Like, I'm asking you as a student, man. I'm just rolling my own ideas and things that I'm trying to get clear on off of you, man, because I haven't had nobody to talk to about this stuff, to be honest.
And what's your take on psychedelics? I mean, this would be maybe another conversation for another day, but like,
it definitely, yeah, it would be, because I heard in one of your other talks, and you mentioned it a couple of times, but you mentioned that's how you got started in a lot of this.
Well, yeah, it was really with cannabis, which would be another whole topic, but I was actually looking at cannabis in the Bible and references, because modern scholarship shows that this is one of the words that was mistranslated out of the Hebrew, was like the cannabis was there. And so it was there for Moses, and it was there being burned in King Solomon's temple. And so I wanted to understand what happened. I was like, all right, if cannabis was it was sacred at the time of Moses and then not sacred later on, because it's obviously not sacred in Judeo-Christian traditions now, at some point in history, it got thrown out. It got purged out of the tradition. And so I was trying to figure out at what point that happened historically and what the context was. And that was when I started learning about Asherah. And then I had a theory. I was like, well, I wonder if Asherah and the cannabis go together and got thrown out together. And sure enough, that's exactly what it was. That I think cannabis is deeply sacred in these pagan traditions and these nature traditions. And alongside psychedelics and just entheogenic plant drugs in general, it's like the whole medicine cabinet of plant drugs. They're all in the mix because that's part of what they did. Part of what these priestesses were doing was mixing up. I mean, that was one of the things that was women's work, was mixing up plant medicines. I mean, that's what it gets called witchcraft later on. But that was one of the things that was women's business that gets denigrated and that women lose respect for. Whereas in the past, earlier times, it was a source of great power and wealth and importance in the culture, that the women would be able to like mix up these concoctions that would do all sorts of crazy stuff to you, psychedelic or not, plant medicines and spiritual journeys and shamanistic journeys and all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm for it for sure. I'm for plant medicines, and if anything is natural, if anything that was put here that we can just walk into the forest and kind of pick up, and it can help your body and help you think clearer and help creativity, help you get clear on stuff. I mean, whatever. The beautiful thing is to research all of that, and
what's your take on
so much,
And what's your take on where the Christians versus Christian mystics are falling down on the changing attitudes towards it?
Plant medicine, like, it's coming back around, bro. So like, I've been like a forerunner in all of this. Like, I got shows from like back in 2010 or whatever. We were Christians doing magic mushrooms, and had like amazing life-changing encounters with that, coupled with our faith and with intention in those things. And I had to speak on it. Like I would be doing a disservice to keep it to myself if it was something that was beneficial and helped me. And I went out with a bunch of other Christian friends who were open to the idea, highly spiritual guys, but they were Christians. And it was a big thing because they wouldn't speak on it, a fear of losing their job, a fear of what the, pastors and teachers and whoever in the Bible Belt would think of them. And so I started speaking on it early about that from a Christian perspective, and always tying in the biblical, tying in the the fruit of it. What happens when you partake of said herbs or funguses or whatever. So they're coming back around with all of this. The gods are coming back around. The technology is coming back around. And so now people are having the conversation. And I know for a fact that my podcast has opened up for bigger conversation. Not at first, it's scary, it shocks you. The truth pisses you off at first. And you hear somebody saying they talk to God on magic mushrooms, or that the burning bush of Moses could have been some type of acacia tree or DMT
or it's just as far as I'm concerned, it's just ganja.
I mean, I can't help but even read about the body and bread of Christ and what it did to individuals who got sick after partaking of it. Like, it totally
There's a whole
sounds...
theory that that is a psychedelic, that the Eucharist was a psychedelic Eucharist. I mean, it's a theory. I'm not saying
I can see the connections. I've had some of the big name people on here and talk about it, and you can see the connection. But to say for a matter of fact that I wasn't there.
I mean, I wasn't there.
So, but the connections are totally there for sure for all of this stuff. So that's what helps. It helps me be less dogmatic and be less combative about it, and we can just show up and talk and discuss. And so I've been representing that from a Christian perspective, which has been unheard of, which is blasphemy to even talk about the goddesses of the Bible who are coming back, and is it okay to include them at the table? You know what I'm saying? Those kind of conversations, and it is, and that's the interesting thing.
I mean, it is blasphemous from an Orthodox perspective. It's the height of blasphemy. Would definitely got you burned at the stake a couple hundred years ago. Yeah,
for sure. But it's helping people, man. Like the magic mushroom.
You got to roll with it, and the feminine divine has always been with us. Mother Earth has always been with us. You could beat her up and push her, and back in the closet, but she never went away. Yeah. And she is coming back now, and we need her to come back, and we need to reconnect with her. And so all this stuff is, is all a part of it. And
it's all part of the conversation, like you said, the plants, the Mother Earth, all of it. What's next for you, man? You working on any other books?
I'm just focusing on my work right now. I'm in the
sounds like we got to have a psychedelic book in there somewhere along the lines of pamphlet, something. Yeah, I'm
happy to talk on people's podcasts. That's for sure. I'm not focused on any writing right now.
For sure.
I've been doing my own podcast and website, but I kind of I'm backing off those efforts right now. I just need to focus on my regular work.
Understand. So if somebody wants to support you, somebody wants to get your book, look more into your website, what's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, you can go to the website lostgoddess.io or historyofthegoddess.com. It's the same website. You can buy the book on Amazon or from Trine Day, and I'm always happy to talk. I love talking about this stuff, so I'm happy to come on your podcast again or anybody else.
We'll do it again, man. I've enjoyed it for sure.
And happy to have these conversations. And if you like my book, take a look, and I'm happy to, talk about it. The book's not perfect, but I stand by the big picture of it. So I stand by the big picture argument for sure.
That's really quick. I wrote my book to combat this talk. It was all of the duality within one God, right? That God is both good and evil, and he is all of it, kind of thing. And so my friends were getting into Gnosticism and the other gods and stuff like that. So I wrote my book to really show all of that duality within the one, and to kind of combat it. But at the end of the day, it still kind of works if God is all and God is all, but telling itself through these different beings and different stories, and which is most likely what we got. So I'm having to renege on some stuff as well, or maybe get clear on it. But Edward, bro, I appreciate it, man. I had so much fun. Thanks for hanging out with me. We'll do it again soon, brother. Thank you for coming
absolutely.
on.
Anytime.
All right, many blessings,
Thanks.
bro. Shalom. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. For my Christian friends, listen, I didn't mean to scare you. I didn't mean to, it's a lot of information, but listen, man, you gotta be married to the truth. Not be married to a doctrine, not be married to a belief system or a tradition, but truth. Which means at the end of the day, whatever's truth, whatever is of the truth is going to hold up. If it's built on this solid foundation, which I say is Christ, which is truth, the way, which is the path, and the truth, and the life. If it's built upon that, listen, it really needs nobody to defend it. Truth is truth at the end of the day. And so if these things were true, if they were real, and if they hold any significant value to the story of humanity, the story of the origins of our traditions, of our religions, then at the proper time, you're going to see a resurgence. You're going to see the death of the gods, or the sons and daughters of gods, but then you're going to see them rise again. You're going to see them come back from the grave, like the story of Jesus. But not only Jesus, again, we mentioned in this podcast, the patriarchs. Who were they that were in hell or Tartarus? Who were they? When Jesus died, his blood freed them, the atonement for sin, to pull them out of hell. He defeated death. He went to death and took the keys to death, hell, and the grave, and death has lost its sting. The beings who were trapped down there were now released. They rose again back into wherever we came from. Eden, whatever that word means, wherever it was at, if it's in the sky, if it's a place on earth, if it's a story, a metaphor, whatever it means, there's a return to Eden. When Jesus dies on the cross and he's looking at the two thieves beside him, and one of the thieves mock him, the other one asked for forgiveness, and he said, hey, today you'll be with me in paradise. That word paradise translates to Eden, going back to Eden. What is it? So you got to go back to the book of Genesis. You got to go back to the early traditions, but you're gonna have to break down words. There's no way that you can read that in the English and get any type of understanding. Again, that's why people read that as a literal story, as a literal 7 days of creation. But there's so many contradictions that people are seeing, but cognitive dissonance won't let you break it down, won't let you look into it, won't let you say, well, maybe these were other beings who were in the garden. Maybe there was other women that were in the garden, other goddesses that were in the garden. We hear about Lilith. We didn't talk about her much, but the story of Lilith, they say, was Adam's first wife. Adam, whatever he is, I don't think it's a person, had a partner that was created as his polarity. We mentioned polarities. The gods and goddesses have polarities. The angels have polarities. So Adam had that, because in Genesis 1, Adam was created male and female, created he, them. You have both. And then in the second chapter, out of Adam's side comes another being, or whatever. There's some tricky language stuff going on when you break those words down, side or rib, or putting him to sleep. And it's also another God that comes down and does it. It's the first time we get the mention of Jehovah or Yahweh instead of El. Genesis chapter 1, we've got El, or the Elohim, the gods came down and did this. And then chapter 2, we have Yahweh or Jehovah comes down and puts a person, this mankind, asleep, and extracts something out of him and gives to him a wife named Eve. And then they have children. So all of that's within there, but you got to break the words down. You got to break the names down, because you'll have the word man, you'll have the word Adam, you have so many of these words, but then in English, we're only getting man or Adam, but you're getting Adawam, you're getting Adam, Adama, You're getting Ish. You're getting the word mortal. I mean, you're getting the first mortal didn't come about till the son of Seth, which was Enos, who was the first mortal. So these are the stories of these gods and the descendants of the gods. Who are you? Where'd you come from? Which god? Which lineage? Or is it just myth? Is it some fine story? Or do you have divine blood within you? Do you have star juice in you? You're made out of star dust. So even that idea of the star gods, and they're a part of you, and your flesh is made out of it. They say that our bodies are joined together by matter, which is dust from supernova stars that have died and come to earth. Stars that fell to earth. Listen, angels, stars that fell to earth, and they're a part of you. Their story is your story. Origin, listen, it changes everything. You have both natures within you. I think the Bible is clear on that we are people who have both natures and we have to choose. But then it talks about other beings who have only the lower nature, only the deceiving nature, only the nature of the serpent or the nature of the beast, where mankind's thoughts were continually wicked or continually evil. Who are they? Are they still here? The serpent seed. Like, we're digging up civilizations in Turkey, Göbekli Tepe, all of those places, and you're getting these monuments of serpent beings, reptilians, if you will. Who are they? Were they just a god? Were they a race of people who now are intermixed with humanity? Is it, they say that our DNA was tampered with, that there was a mixture and a mixing. Listen, once you understand that, that's one of the main narratives of the Bible. Mingling, intermixing, strange wives. Why did you marry strange wives? Now we got to kill all the children. Where does that come from? Who were they mixed with? Were they mixed with a serpent seed? Did they look different? Were they gods and serpents? Were they gods and men? A lot of that is in the Bible. That's why I say this stuff is starting to look like Lord of the Rings to me. This stuff is looking like something out of one of Tolkien's writings, J.R. Tolkien's. And you're getting mystery, witches and wizards and enchantments and sanctuaries where they mix the DNA of animals and humans and roots and plants mixed with things. They're doing it now. You know, they've spliced the DNA of, I believe it's goats and spiders. Spider goat. Goats and spiders. So now that the goat milk is produced, has a thick, silky-like texture to it. So it changes the texture of the goat's milk. That's more like a spider web, more like elastic. It's thicker, it's thick, and they make Kevlar out of it. Most of the plants and bananas and tomatoes and things that we're eating today, it's GMO, genetically modified organisms. And it's normal though, because as you're born, here's your tomato, and the tomatoes are big, huge, awesome. They say the only tomatoes that original tomatoes are the little small ones, the baby tomatoes. Those are what tomatoes are. But they've been genetically modified to be bigger. Like when we talk about the giants and people that have been genetically modified, whether it was in a lab or they had their DNA spliced together and they were creating humans or hybrids, which that's in there for sure, or if it was a literal sexual intercourse. There's that too. And then there's all of these rules against bestiality in the book of Leviticus, warning, forbidding. reprimanding people for doing such deeds. Adds a lot more onto the conversation, but again, where did we spring from? Was it just humans that were doing this? Was it ancient aliens? Was it star gods? Was it Yahweh? Was El, Baal, Ashtaroth? Were they all involved? Or is it just one God who created all of the different races and then he let them mix? Who came down at the Tower of Babel? The Tower of Babel, where man's speech was confounded. It says, let us go down and confound their speech. Let's go down there and the word confound is confuse. Let us go down and confuse their speech. You've been confused. Your language is confused. But then in the New Testament, we see God is not the author of confusion. Well, which God? Because it says, let us go down and confuse their language. But in Christians, in the New Testament, it says that God is not the author of confusion. Okay, well, whoever the God is, maybe he wasn't present at that time of the confounding. Let us go down and confuse their speech. It says it's Yahweh. And it gets into the Gnostic notion of, Yahweh being an evil God and all of this kind of stuff. Listen, I'm a student. I don't know. But I know the more that we dig, the more, kind of like Edward said, the more we dig, the more we find out that we don't know, which seems to be the case. But hey, we got a shovel. That's what they're for, to dig. I see a hole, I'm going down it. But if I come back with a rabbit, listen, it wasn't in vain. We're finding out some things and starting to make a lot more sense. It's time to gather the loose ends. So if you're ready to go down this path, listen guys, I've been studying this for months. I've been telling my patrons and the guys and gals who hang out with me on Thursday nights and Sunday morning, like most of the time I've been feeling bad because like that's all we've been talking about, because I've just been talking to them about it. I've been rolling ideas and it's been fun. But this is why I've been manically studying this stuff, like 12 hours a day, 8 hours a day, diving in. I got notes, I got books, I got it all. But before I speak on it, before I do videos, like I'm trying to get clear. So when I haven't been doing a lot of podcasts. I haven't been booking a lot of podcasts. I actually need to book some. But when I seen Edward's name run across my Instagram and I saw what he brought to the table and represented, I reached out to him because I've been studying the goddesses of the Bible. Gaia, goddesses of Greek mythology, and how they coincide, and how their names are interchangeable and their names are hidden. I was like, I gotta have him on. I gotta at least roll ideas off of, maybe get another take. Like when was the separation? I mean, that's why I was kind of thinking that it was whenever the kingdom of Judah separated from Israel or Levi. Obviously there was a separation. So what? You have two major gods. You do have El and Yahweh, but who were the other that were part of the divine council? Which it seems like the divine council were the patriarchs. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Noah, like everybody, everything were patriarchs that became a part of the pantheon, if you will, the divine council. Maybe it was the sons of Jacob, the 12 tribes. 12 is something that plays a prominent part of the Bible. 12 tribes, 12,000 from each tribe, 144,000 being in the New Jerusalem from those tribes, and then a number that no man can number or name, being from the strangers and from the outsiders who get welcomed in. So a lot of my story or my research is trying to figure out what happened to these mixed beings. Are we those beings? Do we have animal and human DNA within us? Do we have the nature of the beast? Do we have a piece of his DNA? Do we have the ability to do really nasty things? Humanity, me, you. Do you have the ability to do some pretty despicable things? Or are you all loving? Have you received the new nature of Christ and that's not you anymore? Or could you, the drop of a hat, give yourself over to that lower beast nature and take a life and end up in prison to do something despicable, something that it's not even permissible for men to speak on? Do you have that ability? I think the answer is yes. But I also think the answer is that you have the ability to do some really beautiful, heavenly, divine art, poetry, creativity, helping people, blessing people, being a friend. You have the infinite potential on both sides. There's an angel and a devil on each shoulder that we have the ability. That's for certain. That only comes through a mixture. The people are confused. We're confounded. Someone confused us. We're happy one day, we're sad the next. We're bipolar. Even Paul talks about it. The things that I hate are the things that I find myself doing. Well, get clear. You got the Holy Spirit. You should be good. No. There's a war within my members. There's a war in my body. There's a war in my flesh. There's a war in my mind. There's a war in my spirit. There's wars and rumors of wars in and around me at all times. And I'm the governor. I have to govern these wars. I have to govern this kingdom that God has given me and find it sovereign. That's our job. That's our plight. To govern yourself. Because do you not know that you also judge angels? We should be able to judge the matters of your own body, of your own mind, of your own family, and then the things of God, others. If it's a righteous judgment. Judgment's okay. I don't judge. No, I totally judge. Yeah, I totally judge. If I see you, yeah, like if I look ahead and I see somebody doing wicked things to children, I'm not finna let my child come around you. If you're lying, cheating, and stealing to people, if you don't pay people back when they give you, listen, yeah, I'm judging you. I'm judging you on your actions. I don't judge nothing before it's appointed time. I'm judging you by your fruit. A spiritual man judges all things. So we need godly judgment. We need righteous judgment. How we get that? By practicing. Judge yourself. Rule yourself. Govern yourself. As any God should do. Or any child of God. Any son of God. Listen, if you're a son, if you are being made a son, partakers of the divine heavenly nature, you're a son of what? God. You're a God. I don't like that. You're an angel. Let's say you're an angel. It's the same word, you know, right? Messengers, angels, princes, powers, all of that. They're just gods with duties. Gods with jobs. Most gods have jobs, right? We're getting deep. Getting super deep. He said, you know what? You're talking about all this veneration of the goddess. You can't be a Christian. Want to bet? Want to bet? You can't be a Christian and do magic mushroom. Want to bet? You can't be a Christian and be into astrology. It's forbidden. Want to bet? You can't be a Christian and smoke pot. I don't. But want to bet? I know Christians who do. Want to bet? You can't be a Christian and remember the goddess. Want to bet? If there's anything good, if there's anything true, if there's anything noble, if there's anything virtuous, think on these things. And their names should be remembered. I think we're in this predicament that we're in right now because we forgot where we came from. We forgot who we are. We have descended. The word Jordan means to descend. We descended from a lofty place into the sea of forgetfulness. You left your first estate. And now you got a job. Now you got a family. Now you're confused. Don't these talking monkeys know that Eden has enough to go around? Heaven is in you. So is hell. The ability to create or to live in both, whether for yourself or the people around you. Choose this day. Guard your heart, guard your mind, guard your thoughts. You are more powerful than you know. We're exploring that. Somebody's got some splaining to do. Somebody's got some splaining to do. Listen, we're going to explore it. Man, listen, thank you guys for hanging out with me. I really enjoyed this talk, and I hope you're challenged, man. I hope that you evaluate. I hope that you wrestle. I hope you wrestle with these ideas. You wrestle with these thoughts. And if it doesn't make sense, if it doesn't fit, get rid of it. And if it's truth, it'll come back. Just like the goddesses are coming back. The ideas that you throw out, if they hold any substance, they'll come back. In a week, in a month, in a year, 7 years, 10 years, they'll come back. You'll remember, man, he told me that. God, he did say something similar. That's how this stuff works. There is no excuse. That's how it works. So, man, do what you're supposed to do. Handle your business. You're a seeker. You're listening this long for a reason. If you're still listening, there's something in you. You're married to the truth. And you're not going to stop until you figure it out, until you find what you're looking for. That's what we're doing. Man, I want to say a huge thank you to everybody supporting my work via Patreon. This is a listener-supported, listener-funded show. It doesn't exist without your help. So a huge thank you from the bottom, the top, and the sides and the center of my heart. Thank you for believing in my work, for partnering with me, and allowing me to do what I do. I want to empower you to do what you do. If you're a ruler, if you're a reigner, if you're a prince, if you're sovereign, I want you to do that. If you're a poet, if you're a prophet, if you're a seer, I want you to do it to the best of your ability. Thank you guys for believing in my work and allowing me to do this. I just mentioned, like, studying for 8 hours, studying for 12 hours, doing a podcast like this. I couldn't do it without your help. Without you believing in what I'm doing, you guys are the enablers. This is your fault. You manifested this. And I just want to say thank you. If you'd like to support, please go to patreon.com/TruthSeekah. There you get access to all of my music, 200 plus songs. You get access to extra podcast episodes, behind the scenes stuff, my guided meditations, our Thursday night School of the Mystics, which is our hangout, weekly hangout Thursday nights, Sunday morning breath work, conversation, discussion, meditation, prayer. We do that every Sunday just to touch base, just to roll ideas off of each other. Discord privileges, the Discord community. I've always got it open on my computer. People message me and comments get overwhelming on Facebook. Listen, holla at me on Discord. That's where the family's at, man. So you get access to all that stuff. Go check it out. Patreon.com/TruthSeekah. I want to say a huge thank you to some of the following people who joined within the last week or so. Shout out to Cincy. Thank you for coming on, my friend. Your support means the world. Michelle. That's my Danny Tanner when Michelle from Full House got in trouble. Michelle. Thank you, Michelle, for coming on. That's how my mind works. Songs and movies. Thank you for coming on. It means the world. Thanks so much. Benny Ween, what's up, man? What's going on, bro? Good to have you back. Good to have you, man. I love you. Believe in you. You're doing good things, man. Thank you for the support. Thank you for continuing to ride with me after all these years. Thanks for coming on. Angie A, thank you for coming on, Angie. Again, your support means the world. Thank you so much. Dina Patterson, thank you for coming on, Dina. Many blessings to you. And Workful Demise. I think I pronounced it right. Spelled weird, but I think I pronounced it right. Thank you for coming on. Listen, we ain't stopping. We're getting deeper. Like, these are new seasons, man, that I really am getting so many downloads on, but I'm following the downloads. We all get downloads. We all have epiphanies and words of knowledge and deep held beliefs that are really embedded within our DNA, or they're downloaded from the Akashic, however you want to label it. But I want to have the text. I'm a student of the Bible and of many other texts as well, but isn't that interesting that we can go into the Bible and pull this stuff out? It was there the whole time, but we didn't have the download. We didn't have the capacity because of cognitive dissonance. We just read over it. We read over it. We read over it. I can't read over anything in the Bible anymore. Anything. Like, doing a word search and go and read a reference sends me down another rabbit hole because there's a word. It's like, hold on, what does that word mean? Does that really mean chariot, like a horse drawn in chariot? Yes, it does. Horse drawn chariot. It says horses, doesn't it? It says horses. Well, why they got fire on them? And why are they flying? And why did Gilgamesh talk about having a chariot? Why did Ishtar promise to make Gilgamesh a chariot out of lapis lazuli crystals? And why did she say that I will find you the demons to be the wheels of the chariot that will be the fastest chariot? I'm going to promise this to you if you'll give me a son. Crazy. You have to be able to interpret this stuff from culture and context, and even other cultures. Yes, other cultures. Greek culture, you're going to understand agape, phileo. You're going to understand nomos. You're going to understand hypnos. The gods are asleep. Why? Because somebody put them asleep. Maybe it's a reference in the Old Testament where the gods were debating about going down to deal with the people, and they wanted to be a spirit of slumber. The Hebrew has been interesting because the Hebrew you're not going to get that name from Hebrew. You're going to get something from Egypt. You're going to get something from the Canaanite tradition or the Hebrew tradition. You're not going to get the Greek. The Greek kind of stands alone on its side, but it's in there. You'll be able to reference it back. The Nephilim, you'll be able to reference it back. What does that word Nephilim mean? Nephile or Nephilos, that's Greek. I'm breaking all this down. The strangers, who are the strangers of the Bible? I'm breaking this down. I'm ready. I just want a little bit more context, a little bit more frame, just to see if this is going to benefit anybody. Knowledge for the sake of knowledge, or being deep for the sake of being deep. But if you want context and you're a seeker, man, these are the things that are standing out to me. And again, if you're watching even up to this point, as I did the Patreon thank yous, listen, it's something that you get. It's something that you resonate with. So I'm doing it for myself, yeah. But you already know I got you, fam. I'm doing it for you too. And I would expect you to do the same for me. We're in this together. So with that, I'm going to say peace and shalom. We will do it again. For those of you who are interested, we do have another event coming up. We got the next retreat coming up April the 23rd in Mobile, Alabama. The info is at TruthSeekah.com. Tickets are very limited. I think we have 6 slots, if that, available. And if you want to get in on that, we're going to go out stargazing, breath work, Kundalini yoga, cacao ceremony, all that cool stuff. I've loved every one that we've done. They've all been different. And been so fun to be able to meet with people in person. So if you're interested in that, go check it out. Patreon.com/TruthSeekah. TruthSeekah.com. Peace, everybody. We'll do it again. Shalom.
Your will so much higher than mine. So much higher than mine. So much deeper than mine. So much deeper than mine.
Well, that does it for this episode, folks. To hear more episodes of the TruthSeekah podcast, head over to TruthSeekah.com. And if you're wanting to support the show and get rewards, go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/TruthSeekah.